Welcome everyone to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, BIM Technical Evangelist here at CTC Software, and today we're going to go through a comprehensive introduction of the tool Plotter and Exporter. Let's first kind of talk about why this tool even exists. I mean, Revit sadly doesn't have a quality built-in batch processing type tool, batch printing or file exporting tool. And without this, I mean, they have exporting abilities in Revit natively, right? You can print, you can export to DWG, you can export to Navis, you can do all these things, but it's not in batch. That means the process can be very tedious. You have to manually sit there and babysit the export or print, and you have to manually name files, and it takes time. And the whole goal here is that the Plotter and Exporter is purpose-built to facilitate all of this, both printing and exporting. It can be run on demand on a single model, or, this is the more important part, it can be run in batch on multiple models. There's a caveat to this. I'll mention it a little bit later on, but it can be run on multiple models. And what we're going to do is introduce you today to the basic configuration of Plotter and Exporter, show you how it runs, and show you the export result of some of what it does. So there's a couple of major points I'm going to go through. Where do you find it? How do you access the Plotter Exporter? Later on, I'll show you how to download it if you don't already own the tool or have the tool. You can try it out for yourself on your own projects. We're also going to take and look at the interface of Plotter and Exporter and talk a bit about some of the setup techniques. We're going to talk about selection, how you can select views or sheets, and how you can make this process repeatable. And then we're going to take a look at how to execute on demand, meaning in your active model or models, or a scheduled base export. And we're going to see how this can all work, how you can distribute this to your full team. Since I'm not big on death by PowerPoint, let's just jump live into Revit and take a look at where we can find this tool. So within Revit, I am on the CTC Software tab. When you install any of our tools, any of our suites, whether it be Hive or Project Manager, or in today's example, Batch Suite, the CTC Software tab will appear in your Revit, and this will install automatically Revit 2019 through 22. So it's 4 latest supported versions of Revit. On the BIM Batch Suite, this tool here, Plotter Exporter, is actually the first licensed tool on the suite. There are free tools, of course, but this is the first licensed tool. So if you do want to try it out later for 14 days, you can certainly do that, and you can try out all the settings that we're going to do in today's little introduction. So with the Plotter and Exporter, when you click on it, I happen to be in a Revit project model where I want to be doing some printing. The Plotter Exporter is going to open, and it's going to initialize. It'll provide me a list of all of the views, all of the sheets. You can see a list of all of them here. Here's the sheets, a breakdown of all the views from the project. It also loads up the wildcard search library. Now, my wildcard search library is actually empty right now. Oddly enough, over here to the right, I actually have wildcards in my export list that do not appear in my wildcard search library. And this is an important note. You do not have to distribute the wildcards themselves as individual files to your team if you're setting this up for batch use across your office. You can simply save a configured settings file, and those wildcards get saved within. Now, I will go through the exercise of making a wildcard today so you can actually see how this is put together, how you can set this up, and why I set it up the way that I do. But you don't have to do that on everybody's computer or distribute them to everybody's computer. That's an important note because it makes it a lot easier then to leverage these settings when you only have one configuration that you can share on your network. Okay. Within here, let me just start brand new. Let me start from scratch. So brand new settings, there's nothing configured over here at all. We're going to go completely from scratch. We're going to talk about the interface of Plotter Exporter. On the left, this is asking me what it is I want to include in a print or an export of some sort. This is either views or sheets in my current project. The same list that's over here can appear right in through here, right? It doesn't exactly organize the same, but it's the same views, the same list. Or I can use the wildcards again, and we'll get to that in just a minute. The intent here is that if I had some views that I know that I want to export, maybe to DWG, for example, maybe I go find, let's see here, do I have any views named export? I think I do. Ceiling plans, I think. Yeah, export ceiling plan. I've got a few of these, and I can individually select them from this project. and I can simply drag them over here to the DWG list, and this will be exported to DWG using settings that we'll configure here in a moment. Similarly here, if I wanted to export specific sheets, I could go to my sheets list. Maybe I want these to be printed. I could select a collection of specific sheets and drag them maybe into the PDF list, and they'll be added there. So adding views or adding sheets to something, and it can be either DWG exports or sheets or whatever you want to export, you can do. That's totally fine. Here's the trick though. If you're trying to make this a true batch tool, if you're trying to make this repeatable, use this over and over again, every single project will generally have a custom selection of sheets. And you need to make sure that all of your sheets that you intend to print make it into the print list. Or if you had export views that are custom project to project, you don't want to have your team manually add those into the list. So we're going to introduce the concept of wildcards now. Let me remove all of this because I don't want manual sheets in here, and I don't want manual views in here either. So I'm just going to remove all the selected items, and we're going to go over here to the wildcard search library. Wildcard searches are broken down very similar to how views and sheets are, based on view type or all views, based on sheet type or all sheets. Well, in this case, all sheets is basically what's there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a selection set of some specific views. I happen to know within my project standards that I have a view template that I use on a number of different views, and that view template or view templates has export CAD as a part of its name, as a part of that, a property that gets applied to my views. And I'm going to use that here with my views to export any and all views that somehow relate to export CAD, because I might have 3D views, I might have 2D views, I might have elevations or RCPs or you name it. So I'm going to add to this list a new wildcard. And for the search, I'm going to search for everything. And I'm going to give it some kind of a name. So the little asterisk here is everything. It's wildcard search. And that's typically what I do. I find everything. I don't really care about the view names or the sheet names. I just want everything that's specifically a view in this case. And I'm going to tell it what I want to call this. I'm going to say CAD, we'll capitalize that, exports. You could put some other name on here if you wanted specific view types, but I'm going to look at all view types and I'm going to look at all disciplines. If you did have the intent of using this specifically for just architecture views or just mechanical views or structure, you name it, you can do that. But I'm going to do all views of all view types. My view types would be things like 3D or floor plan or whatever. Okay. You can also choose to include views with this wildcard that specifically have certain revision cloud numbers associated to it, or maybe just the highest revision cloud. Contains highest revision defined or contains highest revision issued, right? So you can use those as some of your filters as well. In my case, what I'm going to do is go down here to the view parameter properties, and I'm going to use a property in my case that I believe I have called view type. I think that's my parameter, which sort of coincidentally matches up with Autodesk's terminology of view type. Yeah, that's the one that I want to use. That's my parameter here. And what I want to do is find anything that explicitly equals a view type that is export CAD. So this is the property that gets applied to my views with my view templates, and this is what I want to effectively export. If I test this right now, test this out, no views were found for everything. That is interesting because there certainly should be some that match the view type here of export CAD. I probably should go double check that real quick here. Search for, yeah, everything. Don't care about case. And let's just okay this. Interestingly, I left this checked and I didn't actually specify a revision setting, and that was a problem. Let's retest this. There we go. So now I've actually got this configured correctly, and you'll notice this is finding ceiling plans that have that parameter on it. You'll notice the floor plan here for my site export, and you'll notice my 3D view for site export. Now, this is not, again, looking at the title of the view, despite it matching. It's looking at the property on the view. So if I click OK and OK here, I now have a CAD exports views collection, and I can drop that into my DWG exports. Every single project that I go to from this point forward now, if I use this same wildcard on those projects, as long as CAD exports is set as my view type from my custom parameter, then that will be included in this list. And I do not have to go through the exercise of manually finding those views in my long views list over here, I can simply use the wildcard and it'll find it and add it to my export set. Far more repeatable that way. Similarly, if I want to do sheets for PDFs, for example, I can do the same kind of thing. In my sheets here, I'm going to go ahead and add another wildcard. We're going to go ahead and put an asterisk on this. I'm going to call this ARC new sheets. Okay, I'm searching specifically for sheets. Again, I have the revisions option for the sheet, but what I want to do is I want to filter based on the discipline this time. Let's go find sheet discipline. Sheet discipline. Here we go. That's a custom parameter, again, that I added, and I fill that out for my sheets. And if that equals specifically architectural or architecture, when I test this, I should find that all of my architecture sheets have that discipline on there. Now, here's a problem. I have some demo sheets and some existing sheets as well, because this is an existing building with some demolition and then a bunch of new construction. And I don't want the architectural demo and architectural existing sheets in this set. Notice this is architectural new sheets specifically. So what I'm going to do is add another filter. I have a parameter called sheet phase. Again, another custom parameter that I've made in my project. You can certainly use your own for yours. I'm going to set this up to equals new, and then retest my export and just double check what's going on here. You'll notice this is just now the A sheets, just the A sheet. That's all I really wanted. And so I can okay this, and I can use this again over here for one of my exports. I could have a PDF dump of just the architectural new sheets if that's what I specifically wanted in my export. Now the reason why I do that, arc new sheets, is because the next little area. Inside of Plottr Exporter, you have some export settings over here. Each of the individual kinds of exports can be configured for exactly how you want them to export. In the case of PDFs, I want to use, where is it here? I have to get my PDF printers real quick. Give this a minute to look for just PDF printers. Probably will have like the native Windows PDF export. I'll have the CTC PDF writer. You might have Bluebeam or Adobe, you name it. Any PDF printer will be used here as long as the output file format of that printer is PDF. It'll show up in this list. So I'm going to use the CTC PDF writer. I like how it prints. I'm also going to use print settings that exist in my project. Make sure that your print settings do relate to the printer that you've chosen, in this case, the PDF printer. And I'm going to go ahead and use architectural, I believe, D-size sheets in this project. I can tell this exactly where to go. And I can use relative project directories if I need to. If these projects are stored on my network, I can certainly use that relative project folder to save this into a particular directory. So I could do something like, let me just browse to where this particular file is real quick here. The one that I have open is in my little demo folder. And I have a bunch of Revit models, and I have an exports folder sitting there with a PDF subfolder. And in the PDF subfolder, you can see some date and time-stamped folders inside there. PDF folder is my destination directory because I'm going to tell this to automatically create a subfolder within there that is set up by the date. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Now, if I wanted this to be a specific directory in relation to my actual project models, I would do /exports.pdf, and it would know exactly where that was supposed to go. Now, the way that I like to do my PDFs, I like a single PDF personally. So I'm going to combine all of my selected views or sheets into a single file. In this case, it's just architectural new for now. And I very specifically want to keep the pages in a proper order. You see, in our architectural and engineering print sets, we don't always just alphabetize our sheets. It's not A for architecture, C for civil, E for electrical, and so on. We usually put them in some very custom order, like a title sheet with a T or G prefix, and then civil, and then structural, and then architecture after that, and then other things. So I want to make sure that if I have a specific order specified here, that my print stays exactly in that order. And then I also want to specify the exact file name for that single sheet. I could either do individual separate files using the view properties or sheet properties, or I can combine this into one big print file with one name, and I don't have to worry about individual view names. And so in my case, what I like to use is the project number and the project name. And sometimes I will put the printing date on that file so I know what that date stamp happens to be. So I can have that explicitly be my export name for my file. Notice how my project name up here does not necessarily match what this actually calls out. And that's fine, because I can use the properties directly out of my project information parameters for these naming conventions. Now, if I want to use this consistently, I sure can. I can actually copy this file naming rule to all of my extra formats in case I want to use this stuff over and over and over again. In my case, I'm just going to hit OK here and leave this as it is, because I'm going to name my DWGs just a little bit differently. Oh, and it doesn't like my export folder, apparently, so I'm just going to rebrowse this back to the explicit folder because it doesn't like, for whatever reason, how I named that. Probably because I'm in a local copy setting this up and I'm not actually in the central file. It doesn't know where that directory is, because when I'm actually running this in an automated fashion, I would run it from the central file directly, and that's how it would know what the main directory is. This is not the central. This is a local copy for me. So I'll use the explicit name for now. Similarly, my DWG configuration, I can do something very similar. I'm going to browse out to my DWGs folder right here. Again, you can see I've done some exports in the past. Again, I want a dated subfolder. I can use specific DWG settings out of my project, or I can use custom export settings and edit those, similar to what I would do for Revit inherently. But if I've got certain settings that I want to use on a project or a couple of different projects, I can leverage that. I also, again, have naming conventions. And for the views, that's the part that I really care about, since that's what I'm really exporting is views with CAD exports tagged. I don't really care about my sheets. Those are not going to DWG. Those are going to PDF. So I'm going to do just view naming conventions here. And I'm going to pull a bunch of things out. I'm going to pull everything out and then re-add stuff back in. So similar naming convention to my sheets. I'm going to go ahead and use the project number, the project name. I'm going to use, perhaps from the views properties, the view type, I believe. Yep, that's going to work. So view type. And I also want to use probably the view name. So we'll go ahead and use that. So project number, project name, view type, view name. You're going to see a little example down here. Building elevation, that's the east elevation. I could probably skip the actual view type and just use the name, but I like to include that. That's my personal choice. You can obviously set it up however you like. And I have the option, if I want to here, of including the processing date. But since most of my consultants outside of my firm will be using these as X references, I probably don't want to include this because my name would change every single time. What I will do is keep it in a dated subfolder here, as I mentioned, and that way I know what version it is and I can send that out. If you really want to put the date and or timestamp on, I mean, feel free. That's obviously a property that you can leverage. So I've got my PDF and DWG settings. I'm not going to worry about any of the others. They're all very similar in how they're configured. The real difference is, like, what do you want to export and how specifically do you want to name it and what specific settings do you want. If I was doing Navisworks, I would have specific Navisworks settings here. If I'm doing IFC, it's IFC specific settings, right? So you have the settings that are related directly to that export type. Ultimately, I can just go ahead and right now, if this was all set up, I can hit run now. And it would run on my active project, on my current project. Or if I had multiple projects open, I can select specific open projects and have it run on each of those. So in an on-demand method, I can just go ahead and run this whenever I need. Now, I want to show you one more thing just about this export setup. I'm going to open up some saved settings, which, by the way, you can do. You can save your settings out to whatever, destination it is you want. In my case, I'm going to open up some settings, and I've got them in my little sort of centralized location here for Plotter and Exporter. And I'm going to use my architectural structural print settings here. So you can see I've got PDFs in the list, DWGs in the list. The CAD export views is very much the same as what you saw before. If I edit this one, you'll notice that it's view type export CAD, right? It's exactly the same settings we showed just a moment ago. And then my individual PDF exports here, you can see architectural existing, demo new. I put them as 3 separate sessions here, and structural exist, demo new, same thing. And then my general sheet is first. And that is because in my PDF, I want to combine this together, keeping the pages in the order that I've selected, which is exactly this order here. And within each of those selection sets, it'll alphanumerically sort those sheets. and I'm naming it by project number and project name. So it's exactly the same settings that you saw me configure just a moment ago. So if I was to click Run Now, right now, on this active project, it would take it about probably, I don't know, 60 seconds to about 2 minutes to actually complete this full print, and it would dump, the PDFs and the DWGs out, and I wouldn't have to babysit or watch that. And that's all well and good. But here's the deal. You don't want to watch that happen, so I'm not going to actually click the Run Now right now. Maybe I'll do it later during the Q&A session. We can let this thing run. But that is certainly, a way of running it. The other way of running it is by using a scheduler. And this is where this tool becomes incredibly powerful. If every Friday I know that I want to print this for a collection of projects, I can set this up to do exactly that. With the scheduler, the one thing that you absolutely have to have is you have to have saved your settings, your settings someplace. In my case, I've got an architectural structural print set, and it will do exactly these settings and know what those export settings are supposed to be. I'm just going to resave this to make sure it's using exactly what I want. So it is, good. And that's just because I made a change quickly to the PDF settings. It was set to create separate sheets, separate files, and I wanted it to be in a single file with my pages in the right order. So if I jump into Scheduler, there's a couple of other caveats to this. This must be run on a computer with Revit, and it must be logged in. It can be locked. The computer can be locked, but it must be logged in. So you don't sign out at the end of the day. The user that is logged in must have privileges and drive letter mappings and the printers defined from your settings file. That's kind of an important thing. So if you're using a P drive, for example, or an R drive, that must exist and the path of the models must be correct. And we're basically leveraging Windows Task Scheduler for this little step. So I'm going to delete the one that's here right now, and we're going to set up a brand new one. Create a new one, a new print set. This scheduled task is going to be called Webinar Print or Webinar Export. And I'm going to put CTC at the beginning of that because I like to prefix things with my corporate initials so I know that I set this up. It's a CTC specific export for me. I can schedule this to run weekly at some interval every Friday, perhaps. And maybe I want this to run at 6 p.m. So I like using 24-hour time. So 1800 Central in this case. If I was working in other time zones, I would need to make sure that I synchronize this to, whatever the time zone is, since I'm running this on my computer, which currently it's, 12:22 Central time. So if I wanted this to run, 6 o'clock Pacific, I'd probably put in here 1900. Sorry, Pacific. That'd be 8 o'clock 20. This is using 24-hour time because that's my system settings. You can have yours set up however you like. It's going to start to run this then on Friday. And what I do is I add here a configuration file. That's that saved setting that I just saved out. Architectural structural print is the one that I was using a moment ago that had my settings in it that I wanted. So I'm going to add that to my list. I can click OK to that. And then I can add some files to that print set. So if I have, I don't know, say a couple of project models here at my fingertips and I want to add them in, I can do that. And this tool is actually pretty powerful because it's actually version agnostic to a degree. So if I've got an architectural 2020 model and a 2021 model, and I want them both to use the same settings, these probably would be from different projects. In my case, I have a large demo set from a single project. But if you did have multiple versions at play here, that's okay. Because when this thing runs in an automated fashion, it will open up the correct version for the model. In this case, 2020 Revit or 2021 Revit. And I can have other disciplines at play as well. So if I wanted my structural prints, since this is an architectural structural print set, I could choose those as well. Any of the versions that I wanted to have opened and printed. I can add them all to the list. I can click OK. And then on Friday at 8 p.m., this will begin with the first model. It will trigger Revit, in this case 2020, to open. It will run the print based on my settings in the background here, and then it will close that central model without saving. And then it will move on to the next one. It will open up Revit 2021. It will do the same thing. It will print that to its proper directory, and then 22, 20, 21, and 22 for structural. It will run each of those prints individually. So it's going to run those in whatever their series happens to be, and I'll be done. I can click OK. I can set this and forget it. I can just shut down Revit at the end of the day, lock my computer. Windows L is a good keyboard shortcut for that. Don't sign out. And this thing will run. Important note, as of today, this will only run on projects that exist on your network. This will not currently run in an automated fashion with the scheduler on a project that exists in BIM 360 right now. We're working on that. That'll be coming soon. But for right now, it runs on projects that exist on your network. This will absolutely run and print projects on demand that exist on BIM 360. So if you interactively, midday on a Friday, want to run a print, you can certainly use all these settings on a project that is hosted originally on BIM 360, but is open in your current Revit session, and you can run now these settings, grab lunch, and let it finish the prints. By the time you get back, it'll have done all the exports, all the prints that you asked for. So you can certainly run this on demand. So in this little discussion today, we've talked about the general interface of Plotter Exporter, how to configure some wildcards and how to do view selections, how to add them to the export settings, modify or the export selections, modify the export settings, save and reopen those pre-configured settings. That should get you well on your way to leveraging the Plotter and Exporter tool itself. So then some of you who may not have this tool set already ask, well, how do I get it? How do I get my hands on this suite of tools? I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. What you're going to do is open up your web browser. You're going to jump into ctcsoftware.com. From ctcsoftware.com, you can go to Products. And from Products, you can go to the BIM Batch Suite. That's where this tool is located again. BIM Batch Suite for Revit 2022 and 19, 20, and 21 as well. It supports all of them. You can try it free for 14 days. And then, of course, you can check out pricing and learn more about these suites and see little demo videos and previously recorded webinars about the other tools in the Batch Suite. But that's how you get your hands on that suite. So with that, I'd like to open this up for some questions. And while we do that, for those of you who are probably going to jump off in about 2 seconds after I say questions and answers, I want to thank you all for showing up to the webinar live. We always enjoy when you're here. And if you do have questions, you can certainly interact with us in this live environment.